So one thing that I am still very afraid of and was one of my big fears, I've always been afraid and very hesitant to call myself a female tricker. But unless I call myself that, I realized that I would never become one in the first place. And there's a good reason for this. Well, first of all, if you want something, you have to be it first. And this is the very strange part because you're trying to become, let's say, a tricker. Starting to call myself and see myself as an actual tricker was the only way that I would start to embody what a tricker does. When I tell trickers that I'm a beginner, they usually already assume that I'm able to do the basics as a beginner, which were already very hard for me, especially just training alone. But no, I couldn't do any basics as the beginner that I was. Usually people start at a very young age or have had at least some background of some sports during childhood. But I am 24 and I was a beginner at 22. They would ask me on how long I would plan on keep doing tricking and how long I would want to do it, as in what age I would want to stop or until what age I would keep doing tricking. And even if people don't really say this out loud, but they're kind of putting a doubt into you or their own doubt into you, because most people, I guess, step in the late 20s to the beginning of 30s. As I said, I didn't really see much older trickers so far. From my mind's perspective or from my will, it's to just trick as long as I can. And I don't have any age in my mind at which I would want to stop or which I would want to reach before stopping. There's no age in my mind, which means that there is no real limit except for illnesses or physical injuries that somehow happen very suddenly or, unforeseen. And, being a beginner at my age is also something different than being a beginner in childhood or your teenage years. I actually had very, very strong doubts about myself, and sometimes they still even exist, mainly because of the fact that I am surrounded by people that are much younger, usually, and much more experienced as in having been in the tricking sport for longer years than me. But to me, thinking that I could not become a proper tricker because of these circumstances would just mean that I would never be able to become what I set out to become. But I realized that thinking these questions out loud to myself and trying to prove them to myself by looking at others and what they're doing and how they are doing would just put a mental limitation on myself and would keep me from actually becoming a tricker at one point. Why should I put this mental limitation to myself? In the first place, I have the choice to control or think about what I want to put my energy and my time into. It is for me to try and to fail and fail again and succeed. But that's how you get to know how far you can come. You will never know if you never try in the first place. This just goes, let's say I don't really believe that I could ever become a tricker and I suddenly somehow still succeed to become quite decent at what I'm trying to do. I could still be very doubtful in my mind about what I'm doing, even if I do it right. And this is what I mean by mental limitation and your fear of success. Trying has brought me to the place I am in my life, and I would have never been here if I never tried. People will put limitations on you based on your age, your gender, how big or how small or how tall you are, like the physical state. There's been countless times where I've wished for different circumstances in my childhood. There are things that have been out of my control, that I've just been born into, and I can only work with the circumstances that I have. instead of working against them, by actually also believing that I cannot change anything about me or myself, or that I cannot go after something that I kind of want to go after. Knowing my own circumstances gives me the power to understand what I have been through and why I am where I am, still using whatever I have to go after what I'm trying to do. And even if others stop me on this, since they do not know the circumstances, nor can they change anything about it or anything about my future, except if they're helpful or not, at which point I can decide whether to keep them around me or not. I try to replace that with questions about how far can I actually come. These open-ended questions about where things can go. There is actually nothing that will feel impossible at that stage. This is just something I wanted to talk about, mainly about this doubt, how I've kind of dealt with it in my own circumstances, as I've said. It can feel lonely, but it can also feel empowering. And it does both at different times. It depends. But just have to work with it.